All right, so hello everybody. It's Douglas coming from Cape Town, and today, awesome surprise, we've got Dougal from Cape Town. This would be the first time that I'm doing an interview and we're in the same place. So Dougal will have been in the email a while ago because a lot of beautiful things happen. I write an email talking about my first time in big waves, and out of the blue you get hold of me.
Yes.
And I just happen to be 2 minutes from your house working in a coffee shop.
Yeah.
And I'm a great believer in how things align, and when we're doing the right thing we seem to, all the good things seem to line up. It does work in reverse as well, unfortunately, that when we're in the wrong place all the bad things seem to align. But so we've already spent quite a bit of time this morning working together, working on your body. And it's been great reconnecting. So welcome, Dougal.
Thank you, Douglas.
I think the big part is you're a big wave surfer.
Yes, I am.
What drives people to want to be big wave surfers?
I guess. Well, I was that kid. You know, where you go to the swimming pool. You're a kid, and there's the high dive board, and then there's the little dive board, and there were some guys who could go and do like somersaults and double somersaults off the low dive board, and then there were some guys who wanted to just, the high dive board wasn't even high enough for them, So I've always liked, I loved holding my breath, and I've loved jumping off high things into water. So when I started surfing, I wasn't very athletic, but I quickly figured out that people were really impressed when you ride a big wave, because it just looks amazing, and you don't have to be a very good surfer, but you've just got to, you just get on that wave, and that's why I became a big wave surfer.
And it's how long have you been in the big waves? Because I asked you if you could write your story, and it's just a simple one of when we first met, because I always like, when you first made your appointment with me and you came through to Hart Bay where the practice was then.
Yeah.
And when you said, "Hi, I'm Dougal and I'm a big wave surfer," I remember saying to you, "Awesome, I just manifested you."
I was like, what does that mean?
and for you folks at home, it's like, what was so interesting is I wanted to get into big wave surfing, but I didn't have any connection with anyone in the big wave surfing community. And at that point, I still was running a practice in Cape Town, and it was amazing. It took about 5 days for you to arrive. So apparently, this manifesting stuff works. But it becomes such a fascinating thing where, your body was in a limited place and you were struggling to paddle. And I think the big thing with when you're surfing big waves, you really have to have an understanding of all of the factors going on out there. And it's amazing when you've got the wrong framework or the wrong set of rules of how to understand your body and what it can do, and you're going to work harder and harder and not get any better. So your shoulder was messed up and your paddling was gone, and we discovered, obviously, because everyone watching this who's part of the community would go, well, obviously it's a zone 1. Shoulder was just taking over, so shoulder was tired because these boards are big and what you're asking for is too much. But it's also amazing, isn't it, how quickly the body switches on when we show it the right things and what's possible. Because I think after that first session you're like, well, when can I give the paddling a go? I was like, well, go right now. Go paddle, go test it. We don't know until you get out there.
Yeah, it's true. I went and I surfed 3 times that day. And then I surfed, I think, in the rest of the week, I think I probably surfed total maybe almost 6 or 7 or 8 times, which is a lot to surf. And I mean, it had been a long road for me. Like, really, it had been 15 years. I'd had an accident. I was on a foofy slide. I don't know what's a foofy slide in America.
I don't know. Slip and one of those slack line.
It's like it's a taut wire, and you hold onto a bar, and it's pulleys, and you slide down it,
into the water and do a nice backflip from an
and I was on this. I was dangling with my full body weight on my shoulders, and the slack came off. The tension came off the steel cable, and it suddenly dropped a couple of meters, which meant that my full body weight in full extension like that dropped to 3 meters, and I took my full body weight through my shoulders. And anyway, it was, the short is that it was 15 years of constant pain. Like it would move from one shoulder to the other back stiff, sore, whatever. And then when I came to see you, someone had recommended you, and you started working on me, and you hit a few points, and you said it's not even in your shoulder. You said it's in your hips. And you told me about Rag Neertling, the Olympic swimmer, who I'd worked with just like a short time before.
And when you say worked with, that would have been as a photographer, because you're a photographer.
As a photographer, yeah. So I'd been watching how Rag moved, and I'd asked him some questions about his body anyway. But somehow you'd worked with him, and you told me, you said Rag's main problem is in his hips, and then you related it to me, my problem, and you activated me, and I can, it's not like it's been a miracle fix that it's gone away forever, but I'd gone for sometimes 3, 4, 5 months of not being able to surf, and the longest time I've gone since they've not been able to surf because of like my shoulder getting stiff has probably been a week. And when it gets stiff, then I just do your things. The activation points, and I go in here, and I go in there, and I roll it out the back there, and I hit. So yeah, it was significant.
So that's obviously important, and I want to chat about our reciprocation was you paddling me into some, or giving me the opportunity to paddle into some big waves, and that was part of the email that I sent out to the community. But it's funny that for me what it was I so wanted to be out there, and the day that was chosen was sunset, beautiful day, sun shining, water beautiful, perfect, everything was incredible and amazing, and it was so much about like putting wetsuits on. You were like, are you feeling that, like that overwhelm yet? And I was like, no ways at all. This is amazing. This is what I've been looking for. And the whole experience, I was so taken up with the experience, and kind of, in Black Beauty is the board that you gave me, and I just want you to, in a digital recorded space, acknowledge that was a really seriously bad board to give poor Doug.
So there you can see a couple of boards in the back there. I mean, if you could look up, there's boards above us, there's boards all over the house. I think since that Black Beauty was my first big wave gun ever. It was a 9-footer, which as far as big wave boards go, never ride a 9-footer at sunset anymore.
It's undergunned. It's too small.
It's too small. And it was thin, so it's got no volume, so it's got no real paddle. I don't know what the equivalent is in another.
Well, it means you can't get the board moving really fast, which means no matter what, you're going to have a late takeoff.
Yeah.
Really good for beginners.
It's like a bicycle that doesn't have like a high gear, so you can lots of resistance, so you can go fast. It's like you've got a lot of effort and you don't get enough speed. So yeah, I had you on Black Beauty, and I mean, like I told you just now, I said if you come when you come again, I'll put you on a much better board. But yeah, you did really well. I remember that on the beach you were you'd already visualized it, pictured it. You already knew you wanted it, you had, and you were 100% primed. There was an experience. You were very tuned into the experience that was coming, and you were like a sponge, like you. I don't think I've taken anyone else out subsequently who's really been that sort of all senses, all hearing, all smell, all like wanted. You really wanted to get a lot out of it, and you did. And I remember like you attacked it. Like you didn't really have a survival instinct.
It was called Trust in My Coach.
She said we hadn't even done much coaching.
Yeah.
No, you went at it really hard, and you got a bunch of waves really quickly, and I was amazed. I was like, "Geez, this guy, you know." Sometimes you can take people who want to do, who think would excel, but they don't. And some people take a long time to get waves out there, you know, because everything, you know, a big wave isn't just higher in height, but the dynamics of such is that for it to become a big wave, the energy that moves through the water is moving much faster. So when people get out there, you know, you're used to a certain speed of something, but a big wave moves much faster, so you have to paddle faster, you have to move faster, you have to, you know, the acceleration point when you stand up, everything's different, you know.
Well, that for me, that first wave is, I'd never, it was like driving down the freeway, but sticking your head out the sunroof. It was so fast, it was so insane, and it was amazing. And I think I was, you know, I think when your desire is so great, it is amazing how the universe can provide you with a perfect platform. And at that point, because I like that, I was 100% committed. It was like, so I got this perfect wave, and it was long and beautiful and pulling off, and almost like just being like, wow, what was that? And I think that the thing that for me was a big deal was the wipeouts, you know, and I think after, as you said, there wasn't that much time for preparation, and how to get under a huge wall of whitewater, and what to do underwater was kind of quickly thrown at me, because we were preparing, and actually what you do, like in a smaller wave, you do something called a duck dive. So you actually push your board under and pop. You definitely can't do this with a huge wall of whitewater. So what you do is you pretty much stand on your board and dive off it so you can get as deep as possible. But one of the things I learned very quickly after the first wave came over was don't have your legs straight when the wave actually hits.
You learned that on that first one?
Yes, because I nearly lost a leg.
That's very impressive. Yeah. Wow.
Because my legs were straight, which meant when the leash pulled and the wave was taking the board and this leash, I literally felt like someone was trying to, like a chicken leg trying to be pulled off, and I'm like, okay, so I'm not going to do that again. So it was the minute I was feeling the next wave coming, I was going up into a ball to allow it to have a little bit of give.
Amazing! I'd forgotten that you got that out of it. I mean, that takes a lot of time and experience to figure that out, you know. I mean, like,
well, I reckon I was going to lose my leg. It's kind of, that was purely a survival decision, and I think it was in the 4-wave set where that was what was amazing about that was getting dragged in, and like obviously as we face it off to the right, so it was like from where everyone was surfing off to the left. And popping up what felt like 400-500 meters in, and nothing looked familiar. Yeah. Like I've always seen sunset from the other side, from the Cormacky side, and this side was totally unfamiliar. I couldn't see any of the surfers. The waves looked strange, and it was just like, whoa.
You're in the kelp forest there, on the inside,
Yeah, that was.
You can't paddle properly on it. It's difficult.
But you see, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I was just like, wow, okay, and paddled out. And I think again, it's sometimes when we start something new, our passion and our desire to be there allows almost the world to give us that beginner's luck. To kind of go, hey, and we'll get you out. And it took me ages to paddle out and figure it out. And, oh, there they are, and eventually come on round. But in all of that was amazing. And what was so interesting today, because we've had a session already, where I've worked on you as a follow up from what we did last week, and one of the people that we were talking about was a guy called Simon Lowe.
Okay.
And in my conversation, in my thing, I said in my email, there was a legendary surfer on my outside that I suddenly gave me a reality check. It was a gentleman called Simon Lowe, who is larger than life in the water and quite loud too. And that was enough to distract me.
Yeah.
And and pull back and look over the ledge of, the waves are big. Maybe for you they were not ginormous, but for me they were ginormous. But like a 15-foot wave suddenly became ridiculous, like became a 20-story drop.
Yeah.
And it for me it's so amazing because it was the recognition of him that distracted me out of my bubble, that was keeping me safe. I trusted my body. I trusted you. That's why I was out there. I trusted that everything there was the experience. So even with some of the wipeouts that were pretty hard, some part of me was just going, wow, this is what it feels like. I've seen it. Now I've felt it. Wow. And crazy. But it's like it, and it doesn't matter what it is that distracts us. But in that moment, we get distracted. We lose our focus. That's the moment that our physiology is hackable. That is the moment where, things that are going so right and so perfect quickly go wrong.
Yeah.
And I think looking back at that, I'm really happy that, I tried after that to catch waves, but I was never in the right position. Suddenly I was out of the flow. My arms were floppy. They felt like someone had pulled the bones out, and it was just like, oh. And
it's like you suddenly understood the consequence, or what?
Well, it's the very thing that you were saying on the beach. This is what you see people do when they almost realize where they are. Then the fear gets greater than the desire. And up until that point, my desire was great, and my fear was there, but it wasn't. It was like I'm about to get smashed by this wall of whitewater. But out of the corner of my eye, I'm watching you take off on a wave over there with this big smile on my face because I'm appreciating that. And so it is really a very different environment. And so we went, so there was that, and I know I did sunset again with you another time. And the weird part about that was that.
Didn't you do Crayfish Factory?
I'm going to get to that one.
Right.
Yes, and the second time sunset was nice, but it had nothing massive. But but it was Amy and Matt and myself were up in Hermanus and on holiday, and I had to come into town for a meeting. And on the way in, you got hold of me and said, "Doug, there are waves at Crayfish Factory. You've got to come." So I went and I had a different board meeting. And
did I put you on the Black Beauty again?
No, even worse. All the rules that could be broken got broken that day. So first of all, Crayfish Factory is a different wave. Describe Crayfish Factory, besides the fact that it's the one that really does threaten people's lives.
Well, I mean, like the Crayfish Factory, I call her she's like the kind of like the old lady, I suppose. She was the first one. The first big wave spot where people really looked at and said, this is dangerous, heavy waves, like, can we really do this? And the Crayfish Factory, it's named that because there is literally a crayfish factory on a sort of rocky promontory, or like a jetting out, like a section of coastline. And it got a prehistoric look. There's an old jetty that struts out with like big pylons and goes into water that you can the waves break underneath, and there's a radio tower that stands above it. And but Crayfish Factory itself, it's kind of a long paddle out through a very strong rip. If you get stuck in the rip, the current, you can actually get washed out to sea. The wave itself, it's a right-hander, but it's predictably unpredictable, and it sort of stands up, you say when a wave throws it, like it comes into shallow water, and it doesn't just crumble like that, but it kind of goes out like that and round. And then it's unpredictable in that, you want a predictable wave when you're surfing, because you want to take over one place and ride down and then know what it's going to do. But if you don't know what the wave's going to do. So, a very tricky and can be a dangerous wave. Yeah.
It can be a very dangerous wave. So I can't remember who was with us, but what I do remember standing looking at the wave was first of going, yep, that's pretty mean, pretty big. It wasn't as big as Sunset, but it almost doesn't need to be as big as Sunset,
no, it's not as big as Sunset,
because it's meaner.
It's
and maybe it's that unpredictability, but we paddled out, and I think I must have paddled for about 15 or 20 waves, and no matter what I did, I couldn't get into those waves. And so you said to me, no, I think it's actually the wrong board for you. So it wasn't a big long board, and it was I don't know, 7 foot something.
One of my boards. Okay.
Yeah, but and as you would know, the best thing to do is not learn a new board in big treacherous waves.
Okay.
And notice how I just keep not learning that lesson.
Okay.
And so you were on a purple quad.
Okay.
I like to think of it as the
Okay.
purple turtle
Okay.
or something
Okay.
like that.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
we
I got
swapped
it.
boards.
Yeah.
And because you said this one will
Yeah.
get you waves, and at the same time you also said, but this board does not surf like any other board you've ever ridden.
Severely rogue surfboard.
And beside that, here's a little bit of insider information that I was too
man.
proud to even acknowledge. Did you know that was the first quad fin I'd ever ridden? So most surfers will, at that point, were surfing thrusters, 3 fins, and some predictable setup. Whereas the quad fin setup gives you like speed down the line, but it's a very different feel. And this board was just friggin' different. And so you were like, no, you've got to get more weight on your front foot, and the first thing that happened, we swapped. A big set came.
Yeah. Yeah.
And next minute, the leash gets whipped off my leg, and I'm in the impact zone without a board, just floating. And I'm like,
The impact zone is a place where the wave breaks. It's the most intense part of the wave. Yeah.
But you know, again, it was one of those funny things. I was loving it. I didn't know what to do because I knew I knew all the stories. Don't swim out into the channel because then
Yeah.
you get swept up in the
Yeah.
rip and you end up out at sea and you don't even have a board.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I kind of floated into the kelp and had the waves
Yeah.
crashing over, and I was almost like an otter, like floating on my back, and quite comfortable. Not sure what I was going to do. I think my blind faith in my coach was certainly serving it, and you kind of had paddled up to check I was okay, and then you went actually in and found the board. And you know, at no point was I learning a single lesson. That was what was interesting. So you were like, okay, should we call it a day? And I'm like, no, I haven't caught a wave yet. Are you friggin' mad? And that was all on me. And so I got the board, paddled out, and you and your mate, like a big set came through, and you guys caught the first and second wave. And the third wave was just this thing that just rose up. And I had to go for it. And it was just everything in me wanted to go for it. But the one thing about the unpredictable is where it was breaking was where that step in the wave comes.
Oh man.
So what happens is, imagine that you're paddling for a wave. As you stand up, suddenly there's another wave happening under
It's
you.
so dangerous, that space.
And you're on a board that
board,
doesn't ride
yeah.
like any other board that you've
The
ever
boil at
ridden
the
before.
factory, yeah. And that board wasn't made to go in the boil like that. I didn't ride it through the boil. I would catch off. Yeah, anyway.
And so when I won't say regained consciousness, when I regained my awareness,
Your senses.
it was pitch dark. And as in, so you don't know which way is up, down, left or right. And
Jeez.
it was crazy because I remember being under there and going, crap, I'm going to die. I'm a really bad father and I'm a really bad husband because Amy and Matt think I'm in a meeting right now. And they're going to discover I was surfing with Dougal and I died. And it was amazing how, you know, when
And
people
I'd have to
talk...
explain it to him, man. You even factor me in there.
Yeah, oh, shame, poor Dougal. And it was amazing how time, like, completely slowed down under there. And, you know, there's a surf movie called Riding Giants, which is about the big waves. And somewhere one of the surfers talks about that situation. And when you can't see anything and you don't know where you are, find your leash and climb your leash. And suddenly I realized, find your leash, climb your leash, which remembering
It's a lifeline,
that I had actually lost the leash earlier before, so it's damn lucky it was still on.
Yeah.
Because otherwise I would have had no orientation. So imagine that, like if we're talking activation, that leash becomes a reference point, a place to take someone to find their way out. Because we've got to still come back to activation. And so I found my leash and I climbed my leash. And by the time I got up, you and your mate, I don't know his name, we'll just call him your mate,
Could have been Jock.
had come over
Could be anyone.
and you were like, we knew you were in trouble because the board was tombstoning, which
Yeah,
means the board's
yeah,
standing
yeah.
upright, which means I'm
Yeah.
somewhere like 20 feet below.
Yeah.
And then you knew I was alive because
Yeah,
the board
yeah.
started bobbing, which meant
Yeah.
I was climbing it.
Yeah.
And
Oh man,
it's kind of and
that's
whenever
a bad situation you're in.
yeah, but you know, it's one of those things, and you come up, and I've done breath hold courses and trained it, and there's a point where your body just has to take a breath. So
Yeah,
you suck
yeah,
in water,
yeah,
and then
yeah.
you're gone. And I managed to just get that breath as I broke the surface. It's like
Was it a stomach breath or a chest breath?
it was an any
You're
breath.
breathing through your ears.
It was yeah. It was an anything, and I think that was what was amazing, because it's like people often say to me, or in the community go, but Doug talks about he got injured here and this there and that, you know, and life is a game and it's a philosophy, and the philosophy is, in my world, is that when you're strong enough to go and find the limit and push it, then that's, if you choose to go do that, you don't have to. But that's the way I learn, and I put myself in kind of crazy situations. But what's very important is I wouldn't have done that if I didn't trust you. And yes, there's an element where I hadn't thought things through quite as well, but I survived. It certainly put me off coming the next time. You know,
So you did learn something.
I did learn something. It's and subsequent to that, I have ridden a lot of quads in order to train myself. But yeah, it's an amazing thing. So life philosophy, life is for living, for feeling, but you still have to manage risk. And I think that's what the world of big wave surfing seems to be putting a huge amount of focus on. And that right now is why a lot of boundaries are being pushed, because there's a greater sense of safety, so therefore people can go further and push harder. So we're seeing different kind of injuries, different kind of things, because people are going to different places that are crazy. Tell me what that means to you.
You've given me a few things that I want to talk about there. Help me to remember the 3 points. One will be physical preparation, second one would be concussion, and the third one will be like the mental game. So I'll start with the mental game. So I'm very aware that like there's lots of people who want to try big waves, but there's one thing they always say. They say, "No, I've just got to get fitter. I've got to get stronger or fitter." And a lot of the people who say this are really good surfers already, you know, better technical surfers in small waves than I am, for sure, you know.
Right.
And physical preparation becomes an excuse not to do something. But I think why you actually excelled on your first day so much was your mental game was really strong, and your desire, and obviously your body awareness and system. I don't know what the right words are, but you know, so you came at it from a different thing, and then obviously you had the skill set, but you weren't relying on pure power and strength. You were relying on your system and your own body
Feel.
knowledge and skill.
Yeah.
So the second one that I want to say is like physical preparation. So I found as I sort of plateaued with my big wave surfing, like skill wise, you know, there's certain, as good as I want to be, like there's always a level where I'll hit where I achieve mastery, and mastery in big wave riding is on any given day being able to ride the biggest waves. Like it's that simple. In big wave, the biggest waves. And
okay, so we're just making sure this is back on. Okay, so concussion and that like, because of the wetsuit, everything is connected, everything is rigid. So you were saying there's a surfer.
Yeah, man. I had a terrible situation where like a young guy that I was mentoring, you know, was, you know, he took a bad wipeout and then was paralyzed. thankfully, it was temporary paralysis, and he has made a big recovery.
But you're thinking, we chatted a bit about this earlier, that you're thinking that in the background there's actually a concussion which is still running.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And very important for the community is what we know about concussions is if someone's had one, the likelihood is there's a vulnerability within their system that means it's going to be a repeated thing.
It was his second major concussion.
Yeah. So it's not like, oh, unlucky, it was the situation that created it. Usually the patterns that we're running in our body create the risk. The threat is always there. It's just a matter of when the right forces combine, then that's going to happen.
Yeah.
And so the body never recovers from it. Why? Because you're still running the same pattern that created it in the first place, and then it's vulnerable to the next, the next.
So let me tell you the story with this young guy. He's like very driven, terribly overtrained. Training everything the whole time. And what we figured out afterwards is he went down, and he must have initially done something like the concussion, whether he hit the board or whether he's probably his head
sometimes you can just
water.
get ragdolled. It's just the whiplashy type thing can give you a concussion because the water's hard, it's cold, so it's hard.
And in his concussed state, he pulled the inflation vest. So his first fail would have been like his physical preparation, like too much whip, whatever. Second, like pull the vest. So now, like you say, if you took out zones 1 and 2, so this vest inflates. When these vests inflate, they come all around your neck, chest area, and they create like it sounds like, you know, and then in this concussed state with fully like this inflated, the next wave hit him and he came up paralyzed.
Yeah, but you see, the thing is, like, as you discovered, like when we did our first test with Dougal, I literally took one finger and pushed his whole body backwards, like without any effort. Now imagine that you're even more vulnerable. You've actually just had it. So this is almost like you could go, boop, like a little tap like that. And someone can completely like break, lose consciousness, all of those things. But here ends up in paralysis.
Yeah.
Because there's zero resilience left in the body. It's the body is locked into a disorientation and overwhelm. So and like in our patterning, our 1, 2, 3 pattern, an overwhelmed state is a 0, where the body's so overwhelmed it has no ability to breathe and move effectively to keep itself safe. So it loses its ability to protect itself. So if the first wave through the concussion takes that away from it, the second one is just whatever the wave, whatever the ocean has in store for him is what's going to happen, because he's got no control of that.
Yeah, I mean, one of the guys who was around during the rescue has said subsequently, because it was more than 2 years ago now, you know, he said, man, that vest created, like he said, you know, he's not it was Simon Lowe. It was Simon Lowe. Simon Lowe says, man, something happened there because he couldn't move, and I think that vest created a weakness. I think that's why he broke his back, or that's why he, because there was too much movement, he had no flex. It was just
and so the only places you can move is up here and down there, because everything else is rigid because of this inflated vest.
And I guess in a concussed state, because you, like, at least when you compass mentis, like you said earlier with your leash, you know, because normally when you bail now, I'm amazed that you figured that out from your first time out. But what you do is, when you bail, like, you always pull yourself in a ball like this, so that you have control over your limbs. Because otherwise, if you like loose and you get, imagine being cartwheeled through. It's like doing a cartwheel underwater, but it's like having things landing on top of you and twisting your body in different directions and stuff. So I guess, like, with his axis of movement restricted, and he wasn't any limbs pulled in, he came up.
And you're this big, but you're also this bigger target, because you're not like this. This is a smaller target. A bigger target, all that force it's just magnifying the force through your system. So I think what it means is that, you know, the fact that we've reconnected, and these are some very important conversations to have, because if our big wave surfers are going out there and they are doing things where they're able to do a lot more, but some of those very things that are allowing them to do more have created a different form of risk that's not yet been considered, not yet being managed. We need to look at that seriously. And I think, you know, this is, I don't know how we'll take this conversation further, but I think it's a very important conversation to have because
I know.
you know,
I'm a connector, bro.
yeah, you are
I'm
a
really
connector.
scheming.
And just so that we put you in context, you know, we're speaking about an incident that happened 2 years ago, but we've chatted about 3 incidences in the last year, and all seriously hardcore, and these are hectic. You know, like I think like the grace that surrounded me when I was out at Crayfish Factory was that I came out of it. You know, I was battered and bruised and a bit shocked.
But also very physically aware, though, on a different level. Like I said, like you went in with more awareness than your average dude or lady, person. Like you were.
But so to finish off, I want to, I haven't, because I kind of suddenly realized that whenever we get together, crazy things do happen. Because you also around your birthday have an event, which I don't know if it's an annual event, but you call it the Duke, and generally it's big wave surfers invited to a location. And I got invited up, was it 2 years ago?
I'd forgotten.
Yeah,
of course, you had another terrible experience.
It wasn't terrible. No, it wasn't terrible. It was interesting.
I mean, it was intense.
It was intense. It was intense. So this one was up the west coast. But here's what happened. I was surfing the day before I went in tiny little 2-foot nothing Muizenberg. Okay.
My wife and child are laughing.
And I was experimenting, and I actually had a jaw expander in my mouth because we do jaw expansion techniques, and I had this thing in, and it was, and what it did is it disrupted my system. I'd also only just come back from the States, so I was disorientated. All of those things, landed a tiny little floater. No, that's how I got my sawney. I literally landed, like imagine this, the size of this table is how big the wave was, which is absolutely tiny. But I landed and my knee literally exploded. And so the next day I was going up into this environment with all these big wave surfers, and I was probably a bit nervous anyway, and kind of thought, oh, this is a good excuse. And then I thought, bugger that, that's not what I do. So I arrived, and I've got my knee strapped at 15 degrees because it won't straighten any further. And these guys are like, what the hell are you even doing here? And so the campsite was by Yo-Yo's. What an amazing wave. And like this cripple hobbles down the beach up, like it's a 5-minute walk, and I probably took about 20 minutes to get down because and paddled out, and Dougal didn't even recognize me. You know, he's just going, who's this idiot? Like, no wonder he's got a twisted knee. Look how, like, because I still, like, the 15 degrees is perfect for surfing. So what? So I was still surfing and happy and loving it and connecting. But actually, you were up there because there were big waves. And it's amazing how I never learned my lessons. Because you guys all went and surfed early in the morning, some crazy place where I was very clear I wasn't going. And then you went to Platbank.
Yeah, that's right.
And I arrived late with a gentleman called Hugh.
Yes.
And you guys were already out. And because it's far out, and you look, it's perfect, idyllic and amazing. And so my biggest board was a 7-foot that I had with me, and I think his was a 7-foot. And from the beach, it looked like a nice 6 to 8 foot, lovely, and we would just walk down the sand dunes and paddle out, not really knowing where, just seeing where you guys are. And there are about 5 of you out. Yeah. And when we get to the first group of guys, they're all on 10-foot boards.
Yeah, we weren't guns, yeah.
And that was kind of confusing for us.
Yeah.
And what really got me was you were sitting about 200 meters further out than anyone else. Yeah. And I had the question in my head, but I didn't ask anyone. Which should have been, why is Dougal sitting so far out? The reason would be is he's waiting for the set. And and so I caught 2 waves, and they were really big and beautiful, and the photographer got a nice photograph of that, and it was cool. And then suddenly we look to the horizon. The whole horizon goes ballistic. And Hugh and I are like, ooh, that's interesting. And you now are way down, and you paddling to this thing that's
I was still paddling out, thank you.
15 foot plus high, thick, mean, and we're like mesmerized, and suddenly realized we're going to get smashed by this, so we get our and that was when it got interesting, because we got through all of that. But for me, because I'd already had the experiences with you, I was good. I was good. But Hugh turned and took a wave and got smashed. And then he went into that disorientation,
Yes, he had a
fearful
attack,
panic attack.
Yeah, he had a
and,
panic
and,
attack.
and so suddenly I was helping him.
Yeah.
And so we managed to get him in on a wave, except now I was out of position. And what was so interesting is you guys were also tuned. You knew the wind was going to turn. And it was almost like, pop, the wind turned, it's onshore, and everything, and all the orientations and markers change, and you guys all come in.
Yeah.
And suddenly I'm sitting out in a place that I've never been before. No one's taken me through any of the markers. By the way, folks at home, don't do any of this. This is what Uncle Doug does, not what you should do. And
the rip picked up also.
The rip picked up.
Where we paddled out, there was a rip. Yeah.
And that was crazy because you can't see the rip when you're in it. And because the wind had changed, everything was different. I was just paddling, and all I could think was, actually, sorry, Hugh. Fuck you, Hugh. You know, you did this to me. Actually, no, Doug, this is what you do. You step in, because otherwise someone would have been in trouble. And it was quite funny, because in all you guys standing on the sand dune going, he's still going.
You
20 minutes
going
in,
further and further out. You were getting pushed out.
Yeah. And then eventually you came down with a gun. And then we swapped boards. And even then, do you know I'd had to duck dive your gun a few times, which I didn't think was possible, but I'd like to say I did it. But eventually came in, and I was just like, geez, this Dougal, hey man, I really I like him so much. He makes me feel so at ease, but yet I walk into the valley of death, and I'm fearing no evil, and yet and yet I'm allowed to do that here, aren't I?
I was reading that scripture this morning.
And
really,
it's quite amazing, because you know it's one of the here's how I want to tie this in is that the psoas, the hip flexor, the one that's the most important to your movement and your expansion, it's also called the muscle of grace. And grace, you know, by the grace of God go I, by your psoas. And so it's when your body, when you're in your body and you're connected to your body and your body is expanding, you are able to sustain, be resilient, be enabled in environments that are complicated and difficult, and still hold your course, stay true to yourself. And I think for me, I'm realizing this now, because I travel the world, I go into all strange environments and do all different things, and this is no different to a strange environment there, that I'm boldly, sometimes really stupidly going, but with absolute faith of the grace that guides, because I do know where my body is. And even then, remembering that I had my knee strapped up and I could barely walk, you know, it probably took me longer to walk up the beach after than paddling in, even though that was half an hour. But it's trusting that this structure that we've been gifted with,
good. I like it.
it's there to love you and support you and keep you safe. But we have to understand it, and we have to honor it. And I think that if you and I can understand what are the forces that these big wave surfers are going through, and saying how has the environment changed and adapted, and made them unsafe in an area that's never been there before, how can we bring that safety in so that grace is out there? Because it's all beautiful and it's all powerful, and it seems like so many needs out there in the world right now. This is also one that's seriously important, because you know, lives really are on the line.
Oh, good finish.
Thank you, my friend.
Good finish.
Woo!
I like it.
Love it. So thank you, my friend. What a great privilege. Woo!
Yeah. Nailed it.